In Chapter 11, we're going to talk about social cognitive career theory. SCCT is based on the work of Bandura. And so the idea is that the social environment around you really guides your behavior. And at the core, humans are really self-motivating creatures, and we are very much impacted by a sense of self-efficacy and our expectations of outcomes, and those very much shape our goals. So these are very important concepts with SCCT. It's all about self-efficacy, what we expect to happen when we put effort into something, and the goals that we're trying to achieve. So we're still in that middle tier of career theory in a developmental space growing from the work of Super. SCCT is a highly regarded theory. It's been around for a long time, very well researched, and it's one of the first theories, aside from Gottfredson, that really takes into account this idea of cultural sensitivity and awareness. So there's not this underlying assumption that career is easily and equally accessible to all persons. There is this consideration of diversity, of systemic barriers, of issues of class and gender, and those factor into the conceptualization of career goals and the process of career counseling. So in looking at this developmentally, all people are affected again by these two really important concepts, the idea of self-efficacy and the idea of outcome expectations. And self-efficacy is, I'm sure, something you've talked about a lot in your human development class. This is your ability, your belief in your abilities to do things, and your belief that your effort is going to lead to accomplishing something. And it's generally, in the case of this theory, pretty task specific. So I believe that I am able to do this specific thing, and therefore I put effort into it. So it's takes a lot of change in belief to be able to build self-efficacy, because we're not inherently with this sense of self-efficacy. It's something that we develop and grow through the feedback and influence of others. And so if we don't have like a good sense of self-efficacy, it takes some work and some support and some experiences to grow a more positive sense of the self. And so there are lots of things that play into what makes a sense of self-efficacy, including background, systemic barriers, identities, experiences in schools, various supports that we may have along the way, and barriers that we encounter. So self-efficacy is one really important concept. Then we have outcome expectations. And in SCCT, this is what we believe will happen if we put effort into doing something. And so depending on our self-efficacy, when we go into investing time and effort in accomplishing a certain goal or task, if we have more self-efficacy, we're going to go into that task expecting a more positive outcome. If we don't have a lot of self-efficacy, we're going to go into that outcome expectation anticipating not having a good outcome. And so based on our previous experiences, we've learned to either accept and expect positive outcomes or negative outcomes dependent on the types of identities we hold, the messages we receive, and the efficacy that we have in our own abilities. So digging into some of the contextual considerations of SCCT. So thinking about, again, this was the first theory to really take into account this idea that there are a lot of different kinds of environments and communities that people exist in. They're not all the same. And there are personal inputs. These are like genetic predispositions. These might be things like genetic medical conditions that impact our ability to do things. These could be learning disabilities that we inherit, our sense of and experiences with gender and our gender expression, our sense of our own identity related to ethnicity, our ability level, our health level, etc. So personal inputs are these like heritable genetic things. They're what we're born with. We have very little ability to change. And bearing in mind that when this was developed, there was a pretty structured view of what makes gender. Then we have background affordances, and these are things that happen around us that shape our developmental process. So these are the socioeconomic status that we're born into. These are being first generation immigrants. These are the neighborhoods that we grow up in and the resources that we have. So these contextual factors then represent either barriers or supports in our ability to achieve our goals and shape what we feel like those goals should be. So according to Bandura, these are perceived, meaning that we have the ability to change them. So a little bit of an assumption there. And they're mediated through this idea of self-efficacy. So based on the efficacy that we feel we have, this drives our interpretation of our own ability level and then shapes the types of goals that we're going to have for ourselves. Meaning that if we're in a context with a lot of supports and we have high self-efficacy, we might dream of being an astronaut or getting our PhD or doing things that we consider to be more ambitious and prestigious. If we are in an environment where there's more barriers and we have lower self-efficacy, we may not imagine these things for ourselves. And that's not to say that they're not possible. This is really about how each individual person imagines their own possibilities and their own goals and their own ability to achieve things. And so as career counselors, we have to pay attention to these things. We have to analyze that, and then we have to work to change that sense of self-efficacy in whatever way we can. So that brings us to the model. And I will talk you through this. So as we're working through the process with SCCT in career counseling, we're going to talk about first person inputs and the background contextual information. These are things that we would get from a typical intake interview. Remembering those personal inputs are sort of those concrete things that are not easily changed. And background contextual things are things that could potentially be changed, but are very influential. So we have to take inventory of what the client is bringing into the experience in the first place. So then, considering what makes a person, which is a combination of those inputs and the background context, each person has learning experiences. And you might think about this as like going to school, but it's a lot more than that. Think about as you're growing up, all the different things and people you were exposed to from different places that really influenced the way you see the world, the way you understand people. Thinking about from some of your career autobiography papers, all of the different people in your life that influenced your thoughts about what careers were possible and not knowing that things were possibilities until you were exposed to them. So this could be all kinds of things, including mentors and community events and going to camp and reading books and watching TV and all of these things that represent learning experiences through the developmental space. So those learning experiences shape self-efficacy and outcome expectations. And those can be shaped in a way that is positive with lots of supports or in a way that's challenging with lots of barriers. So as those learning experiences shape outcome expectations, meaning I have lots of positive experiences in learning, therefore I feel like I can accomplish things, and I've been exposed to a lot of things in terms of self-efficacy that either support a positive view of the self or not so positive view of the self. Those things drive what we develop as interests, eventually the goals we have for ourselves, and the actions that we take to achieve those goals and pursue those interests. And so this whole system can reinforce negative views of the self and systemic barriers that exist, or they can support someone growing and reaching really far and achieving lots of things. And so as career counselors, we're looking at how can we change those things? How can we introduce new learning experiences if someone has not had positive ones? Can we introduce new learning experiences like an internship or a shadowing experience or skill development or something that really builds a new or more positive sense of self-efficacy? Can we do anything to address barriers or introduce supports for our clients? Can we work with them on their outcome expectations by offering them maybe knowledge about different types of career fields or exploration opportunities so that they could perhaps imagine outcome expectations beyond what they had imagined in the past? And through building that self-efficacy, they might imagine more possibilities for the self. And then that'll generate new interests that can support development of new goals and that can support taking action towards going on a different path. So, considering that this is a developmental theory, Bandura talks about how the transition into the world of work is one that happens gradually. And so it's not just about what we learn in school, it's something that unfolds across the lifespan. So we go through all of these experiences as we grow and navigate the world that help us develop a sense of self-efficacy, help shape our outcome expectations, create a sense of interest in different things. They create links between interests and career goals, or there are barriers between interests and career goals, meaning that the things I'm interested in, I don't perceive to be options for me because of that self-efficacy piece. And then how can I translate goals into action and how much possibility do I have to do that? And so as a career counselor, we think about what types of skills or learning experiences someone might need, and we might have to help negotiate social supports and barriers that exist for our clients. But we can't do those things if we don't have a good sense of what's there in the first place. So what does this look like as a process? First, we get a really good, thorough intake interview where we get a sense of what things were like for this client growing up, what their sense of self-efficacy is like, what types of heritable traits and contextual things and background are going on for them. And then once we have a good sense of who they are, where they are, we help clients to explore options or perhaps revisit options that were ruled out due to negative outcome expectations or lack of self-efficacy. So we are doing a lot of searching. We might use some interest inventories here. We probably want to talk about what types of career goals they had growing up and why they ruled those things out, just to get a sense of what kind of contextual things were going on there. And then identify barriers and supports for the choices that they make. So what sort of barriers exist and how can we address those? What types of supports do we need and how can we help them access those things? And then we want to try to make a path that seems possible to pursue the career options that the client has chosen. And we get to use some of our basic counseling work here to address a sense of self-efficacy. So in our career counseling work, we're integrating a lot of other counseling interventions that you might have learned about already to address a sense of self and be able to have new learning experiences in the counseling realm. In their interactions with you as a counselor, they can have new learning experiences too, where they get a better sense of themselves and they get a really safe space to try out some new things and to learn about themselves in new ways. So the goal here is to connect career options with the client's values and abilities and personality, but also keeping in mind that we have to address their sense of self-efficacy. We might have to open up new possibilities in terms of options, and we might have to create some new learning experiences for them to be able to build a sense of being able to pursue their goals no matter what they decide.